Good morning, Story Trading VIPs. We got a lot to talk about. In just a second, we're going to bring on Dan Carlson to talk about INMB. After that, we got the GDP print to talk about. Meta had earnings yesterday. Teladoc, a huge miss. We want to talk about the read-through on that through Drio. Some other stock-specific news with Jack's Pacific, JAKK, Real Networks after the bell, Clearfield, Apple, Amazon. So we'll get to all of that. But first, we're going to welcome in Dan Carlson from Tailwinds Research. How you doing, Dan?
Good. Thanks for having me, Ben. How you doing?
Awesome. Doing great. The reason I brought you in is yesterday I noticed Sava, which is right at the top of our watch list over there, was down huge yesterday morning on some criminal probe, but actually recovered pretty nicely from 14, and pre-market was like 13, up here at 18. So I saw that news about a criminal probe over Alzheimer's data, which may have been fraudulent. So obviously that immediately brought INMB to my mind, and thought it was a good time to catch up, particularly because I also noticed on the same morning, yesterday morning, they had a press release that earnings are coming out next week. So those are the three Alzheimer's plays up there: Sava, Avaxel, Anavex, and Immune Bio. So I would love to hear your perspective on what happened with Sava. Will some of that money flow to Immune? What's coming up for Immune?
Yeah. So thanks for having me. It's an interesting topic. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been recommending shorting Sava since well over $50 a share.
Oh wow!
And frankly, have thought it was a fraud for years, but timing of these fraud situations are always the tricky part. So my understanding is with regards to Sava, that the trials they run have been very. I mean, this is a rebuild of a company that failed before. I forget what the prior name was. There's even speculation that they named it Cassava because they were thinking about going after some sort of a cannabis play, but then switched to what they're doing now. The trials they ran were not placebo controlled. They said they claimed cognition, but when you don't have a placebo unit, you're going to get cognitive benefit from just giving people a drug when they know they're on it anyway. The placebo effect, right? So scientifically, this company has had major questions, and then you throw in the speculation that it's all based on fraud, and this is one that I think you have to actively avoid. So I would say that in terms of how it affects Immune, I don't know is that any money is going to flow from one to the other. It doesn't, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it actually is, if anything, there probably will be a little of that, but it'll be more of casting a pall on Alzheimer's, where, the only drug ever approved in Alzheimer's was
Aricept?
Aduhelm, and it's a kind of failure. So
which one is that? I thought it was. Isn't Aricept Alzheimer's drug?
There are drugs for treating the symptoms, and there's drugs for treating the disease. And the only one that's ever been approved for treating the disease is Biogen's Aduhelm.
Okay.
That I'm aware of. And that's, like I say, it's been a failure. So this space has been a quagmire forever, and it remains that until something is approved. What's interesting about Immune, if we switch gears, is they have been saying all along that these neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, etc., are caused by inflammation. That's the story they're telling. It's a very different spin on the traditional story, which is this amyloid and tau and plaques and tangles, right? But when you look at Cassava, the most recent report that was published about 4 days ago talked about how the pivotal trial behind Cassava could possibly be based, the whole thesis behind it, on fraudulent information. That was from 2006. So what that article was saying was that every bit of Alzheimer's research since 2006 that's been focused on amyloid and tau and that's multi-billion dollars of research, was pushed in that direction by a fraudulent article. And that sort of fits in with the immune thesis. Like, you're looking at this thing wrong. Amyloid and tau are symptoms of Alzheimer's. The disease brings them on, not they don't lead the disease. So I really think that the whole Alzheimer's and CNS story is shifting in immune's direction, and more research is talking about inflammation and less talking about amyloid. And like I said, there's never been a drug that works. So eventually you have to switch gears, and that's what's happening now, I believe.
Okay, a couple questions. Why do you think Sava gained back all its losses yesterday? Number one.
Massive short position, probably some covering.
Right. Okay. And then the other thing is, I noticed Sava has a market cap of 750 million, Avaxel 800. I always say Avaxel, Anavex 832 million, INMB Bio 165 million. That seems to be a huge valuation gap based on all the rosy information you've been giving us about Immune's drug. Why that huge gap in valuation?
It's a function of a couple things, in my opinion. One is, as I've just said, they're approaching this disease differently. So if you go to a healthcare focused hedge fund, they are probably starting to look at inflammation as a driver of Alzheimer's, but they've been typically looking at the public companies that are out there, Biogen, Lilly, and how are they going after this, and how's everyone going after this? So Immune's been a little bit off the radar screen because of that. And then if you look at how they went public, they didn't use a mainstream bank. They've kind of done this on their own to some degree outside the typical biotech route, which has enabled insiders to continue to have a very large position here. And insiders have been, buying stock aggressively and putting money into this company, so they believe in it. But at the same time, so many companies, I'm sure you've seen over the years, they do a discounted deal with some options, get some funds, and then their word gets out to the community, and that just hasn't happened with Immune.
Okay. All right. So what are some catalysts?
Sorry, I lost you for a second there. Sorry.
It broke up a little bit, but we caught it. So I know there's earnings next week. I did get back in. I wasn't completely out, but I reduced my position pretty dramatically back in November with the risk sell-off that was starting. And yesterday added more, partially because of Sava news. Was that a good move? What do we have coming up?
Yeah, I think it's a great move. Like I say, I don't necessarily think that the Sava news is a benefit here, but you do have earnings next week and a shareholder update, and there's two things out there that are going to happen for Immune, and the timing of them is the only question mark, but they're coming soon. And the FDA has put a hold on their phase 2 program for Alzheimer's, manufacturing related. The company has been pretty public in saying that it's manufacturing, it's not a drug issue. And the FDA is kind of understaffed and overworked at this point. And they think they believe it's just a function of that, and they're in communication with them. So that could be removed at any point in time. And I think that will be a major driver for this thing starting to be valued as a phase 2 Alzheimer's, not a phase 1, which will
it's
re-rate it.
Interesting that news, I believe, came out May 24th. That's where you see the gap down from 727, went all the way down to 463 the next day. But the stock is already hit over 10, well above when that bad news came. Do I have the timing right on that?
Yeah, that was the day the FDA complete response letter came out when it hit 460.
Okay.
And basically, the fact that the stock rallied is a function of people believing it's a temporary issue, and then also the XBI rallying during that time as well, right?
Right.
But the other piece of news that I expect to get a good update soon is on their INKmune program, which is the one that doesn't get as much attention, but it's a drug they have for cancer. working on NK cells, and they're in a trial over in the UK. And the UK is kind of a cluster for doing trials right now, just because of COVID and the way they run trials there. And they've had trouble enrolling patients, and they've actually had amazing results on the handful of patients they have. So hopefully we get two things out of that. One is I'd like to hear on their update next week that they've enrolled another patient, which I think would be pretty beneficial here. And maybe they've enrolled a couple more. Maybe they'll talk about when results are coming. But also they're pushing to file an IND in the States to have that drug be used in ovarian cancer. And it's these cell therapies have all shown effectiveness in these blood cancers, but not really in solid tumor. So there's a chance that they get that that drug going here in the U.S. solid tumor trial, and that's there, and they believe they'll see it. Obviously, would be huge for the stock. So that's sort of what's coming there. But I do think you'll get a good update on that program next week.
So two catalysts I'm hearing: lifting that manufacturing hold that will take the company into phase 2, and then some progress on the cancer front. Those two things you expect potentially soon. And
I
is there any
the next month you can get both of those?
Oh wow, that'll be good. And is there any risk of an offering before those things happen? What's their cash position like?
No, they get like 60 something million in cash, and their burn is not that high, so they get plenty.
Okay, cool. All right, so two good catalysts potentially coming up. Earnings next week. What was the date of that earnings report here? August 3rd, Wednesday, August 3rd.
Yep.
That'll be before or after the close? After the close. So next Wednesday after the close, we have Immune Bio. Any other things you wanted to add, Dan?
That's sort of it for Immune and Cassava. So.
All right, great. Yeah, we've been following Immune for a long time. If you want to follow Dan, he has his own platform, newsletter service. Where do people sign up for that?
twresearchgroup.com. It's a free weekly newsletter, and there is a premium service if anyone's interested. So I'd love to talk to anyone about that if they're curious.
All right, great. Thank you for joining us this morning, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Ben. Always a pleasure.
All right, take care.